Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our IIBA Brussels chapter event with the great title Shaping Tomorrow is Sustainability Any of My Business? A lot of keywords in that title. And when I think about sustainability, my first thought is thinking about electric cars, green energy produced by solar panels, wind energy, and so on. But of course, it's not all about that this evening. It's about our daily life, our daily business, and even more. How can we, as business analysts today and tomorrow, act on sustainable concerns in our organization? So, first of all, I also would like to thank our sponsors of this evening, Quiazo and Stone and Stender, who give us that way the opportunity to organize this event. And I feel honored to just give the word to our three speakers this evening who will address sustainability from different perspectives. And Ines, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne. My name is Ines van Langendonk. I have the honor of starting this evening, but a little bit about myself. So I have a background in digital innovation. I've had most roles that you can imagine in digital projects, going from development to analysis and everything in between. At some point, I decided I wanted to be part of the transition to a sustainable economy and went back to school. And I now run a business where we design and build solutions, digital solutions for circular business models and circular business processes. That's all about me, because I'm also happy to have Morten with me today. That is your turn, Morten. Your mic is still off.
Yeah, I got a little help before. I guess you can hear me now. Thank you, Ines, for the introduction. So yes, my name is Morten Stender, and I've been working with digital architecture, building business design for at least the last 10 years. Some would say business architecture, some tend to call it enterprise architecture. There's a big overlap, we'll get back to that. But one of the things that we see working with business architecture and enterprise architecture as a discipline is the fact that we can see all of the moving parts and all of the static parts of an organization, how they actually can be brought together in a nice framework where we can support strategy to realization, or how strategy actually brings also these topics like sustainability on the agenda. So for us, it's a kind of coming from the architect perspective into sustainability, realizing that for us is a kind of strategic alignment also has to include and will include sustainability. It's a kind of one common agenda. We cannot really decipher them as two separate silos. But more on that later, because we also have another great speaker today, which is Stefan.
Thanks for the introduction, Morten. I'm Stefan Bossuet. I'm not the sustainability specialist. It's something that I always do in my private life and take into account when I'm using something or I'm not using something. I have more the kind of theoretical perspective on the requirements part. So I'm already linked with IIBA for quite a while, created the Brussels chapter, which is also hosting this event, co-hosting, and I'm very, very passionate about business analysis for quite some time. And I spend also a lot of my time promoting the BA profession. It also says that I've done some content on the IIBA's Knowledge Hub. And on that perspective, my input on the sustainability will be on the requirements angle, of which before the sustainability requirements were introduced by IIBA last year in November, the status before that I presented in the Knowledge Hub. Warmly recommended to have a look at that. But this will be enlarge with sustainability requirements. That's the reason that Ines and myself started a sustainability talk, because from the three of us, Ines is the one doing most on sustainability. It's her main profession at the moment. And well, after that, we spoke at BA and Beyond in a coffee corner session in person, not hybrid. A lot of people said, like, what did you tell us? This is what we're going to tell. And we had a third person, which is Morten, that was going to join us and doing the business architecture angle of sustainability. That's it. That's all, folks. And now we can go to the first part that Ines is going to tell us.
Thank you, Stefan. So let's dive into this, because we've got a lot to tell in only 2 hours or so. Let me quickly see if I can. Yes, I can click. Raise your hands, ideally, well, your true hand or your digital hand, if you feel that you already know a lot about sustainability. It's always interesting for us to know who's in the room. And who of you apply sustainability in their daily lives decisions? Thank you. And then I've got a third question as a warm-up, but maybe we can use the chat to answer this, because then we can dive into it afterwards. What would be your definition of sustainability? I give you 1 minute. One minute, that's a really long time, I now realize. If you have it, okay, so 30 seconds, that's all you get. If you want to answer more things, then you can do so afterwards. But I have a story to tell. Who of you, raise your hands, has ever heard of Alexander Selkirk? You might not have heard of him, but you might have heard about his story. He's the true person on which the Robinson Crusoe story or book was based. Robinson Crusoe, you must have heard of, a guy who got lost on an island, on a deserted island, and had to survive there. So Alexander Selkirk did that for real in the 17th century, not on a beautiful island with palm trees and white beaches, but on a fairly harsh island out of the Chilean coast. He got stuck there because he decided that it wasn't safe to continue sailing on the ship he was on, and he asked the captain to get off. By the time the ship was ready to go again, he had changed his mind, but the captain said, "You decided, you're on your own now." And they left. Now, what was the situation he found himself in? He was there, stuck forever. He had no idea when a boat was going to pass by and how much time he would have to survive on that island. He had limited resources. As I said, it wasn't a very lush island. There was not so much to eat. Luckily, there was fresh water. Otherwise, he would not have survived it. But it was very limited. The captain had not been very generous, so he had a rifle and a limited amount of bullets. He had a Bible, some clothes, a bit of food. That was it. So very limited tools. Nonetheless, Alexander Selkirk had the creativity to not only survive on this island for 4 years and a half, not only survive physically, but also survive mentally, because after this ordeal of 4 years and a half on the deserted island, he got picked up by a friendly boat and he went back to navigating the world seas. So no burnout and all that things, that didn't exist in the 17th century. He just went on with his business. Why do I tell this story? If we zoom out and we look from far enough, our planet is also a sort of island in a very big sea, which we know better as the universe. And despite some crazy people on this planet saying that we could move to another planet, most of us probably want to stay on this one. Now, what is the context that we are in? I would like my children to also have children, and then more children and more children. We want to preserve our Earth for generations to come. We have limited resources. So far, that has become very clear. In the last few years, COVID has accelerated the understanding of the limitation of our resources. Luckily, we have enormous knowledge, technology, science, and not just one brain to go into this challenge, but billions of brains with creativity. Now, what has our strategy of survival on this island been like until now? Short example, because of course there would be numerous. This is a Mount Everest. Every year, our economy takes 2/3 of the Mount Everest from the crust of the earth in mining. That's the material that we get out of the earth to supply all the things that we need for our economy. 2/3 of a Mount Everest is an enormous amount of stuff. Now you could say, oh, that's a lot, but we build with that, we do stuff with that. Unfortunately, mining doesn't work like that. A very rich copper mine gets this amount of copper out of the mine. And you will guess, no, this is not a true image. This is a photoshopped image of and a representation of how much copper comes out of a very big mine. The rest of the stuff is mostly not used. And unfortunately, if copper comes out, then also a lot of toxic material comes out. Just to give an example of one of our survival strategies on this island. Then you could say, but there's so much earth, we can keep digging, we can go and dig somewhere else. But if you would put all the seas together, this is what the earth would look like. We live on 30% of the surface of this planet. The rest is water. Why do I tell this story? It is a call to sometimes, once in a while, ask ourselves or imagine that we would be talking to Alexander Selkirk, would have to explain what our job is, or would have to explain what the business that we work for is doing, and would ask him, is this a good survival tactics? And what would Alexander have thought of that? Now, there is something the matter. The mining is not the only problem that we are causing. When I started diving into sustainability more in depth, which my journey started in 2018, I found it quite difficult to see, to understand the whole problem and to not get lost in all these websites and all these models and all these figures and all these facts. And so I want to very shortly introduce two models that show where we are, what the impact of our current economy is. I will not be able to go into detail because of lack of time, but you can find the references afterwards, and we'll also share the links to it. Number one, planetary boundaries. Based on research that is ongoing, where the Stockholm Resilience Institute maps out all the natural systems that our well-being and that of all the other species on the planet are dependent on, going from climate change to the state of water to land usage, etc. A very, very good model has been updated last month, shows that we are even more in a very dangerous zone of using more resources than we have, of having more impact than nature can make up for. Based on that planetary boundary model, Kate Raworth made another model because she says it's true. There are limitations to the natural systems, to the natural world, but there are also limitations to what society, to what humanity can bear. And so that outer circle, if you look at it closer afterwards, you will recognize it because it's exactly the same circle as the one in the planetary boundaries. But she has introduced this inner circle, which is the basic conditions that we have to create for every human being on this planet. Because you cannot expect people who don't have enough food, people who live at war, people who cannot go to school, etc., to worry about not exploring the natural boundaries of this planet. Those two things have to go together. It's called the donut economics, just because it's a circle within a circle. As said, please refer to these models afterwards if you want to dig in deeper. Now, how does this translate to the digital world? How do we, what is the impact, what is the negative impact today of digital? There are 6 aspects that I want to take you through. The first, and probably the most obvious one, is energy. The internet uses an enormous amount of energy. You will find figures between 3% and 7% of all the energy used on the planet. You can imagine that exact figures are hard to find, hard to calculate. It always depends on how much you take into account. Now, the thing is, through the years, we have learned to design without boundaries. I'm old enough to still have been a developer in the time when we had to wonder, how fast would the internet connection of our users be? And how much resolution would the screen of our users have? We would have to take these boundaries into account. Today, what boundaries? Everybody's got fast machines, everybody got fast internet. We're designing as if there were no limits. An example, a car, and it's not even a self-driving car, a modern car today generates gigabytes of data every hour. For example, my car tells me what the speed limit is that I have to respect. Of course, my car is not smart. It only knows this because it's processing images of the road the whole time and adding other data to that. And so why do we do this? Because we can. And it's generating ever more data and ever more usage of energy because we have learned, and we increasingly learn, to design without any boundaries. Now, the second part, and slightly less visible, is raw materials. Technology is using at an increasing pace hardware and getting that hardware out to replace it by other hardware. Servers live somewhere between 5 months in a badly cooled farm where they in a badly cooled, bad circumstances data center. In the best case, in a good data center, servers last 5 years and then are replaced by faster models, better models. Smartphone, everybody knows your smartphone does not last very long. The material that we create, technology, electronics, and electrical devices that come onto the European market add up to 20 kilograms per person per year, to give some figures. Now, unfortunately, the smarter our devices get, the more interaction there is between hardware and software. Very quick example, Van Moof in the Netherlands, a company which is in big trouble. Currently, their servers are still working, which means that you can still use the bike and unlock it. Once the servers are down, the bikes will not be able to be unlocked or locked and might get useless and might just go to waste. And we have endless examples of that sort of story. The third aspect, behavior. A lot of our digital innovation has led to behavior of more consumption, of more screen time, of wanting everything now, immediately, fast, and all that comes with consequences, all that comes with growing impact. You can find this online if you're interested. I once did a comics on what if we would use all the tricks that we do in e-commerce in a physical supermarket. Because we use our knowledge of people's psychology to make them buy more, to not stop buying, to want to come back every time. If you would translate that into the physical world, you would have a supermarket in which nobody would ever want to go because it would be super scary and unpleasant. Yet in digital, we consider it innovation. Number 4, inclusion. We're losing a lot of people the faster we go in our digital innovation. And it's a lot of people. In Belgium, there are numbers every few years. There's research done. 46% of the people in Belgium feel uncomfortable doing simple tasks on the internet, meaning checking your blood test results, which has to happen online these days, checking the grades of your children at school, doing a bank transfer online, that sort of thing. We're losing 46% of people who are not comfortable doing these tasks. As analysts, we've got an enormous responsibility there. Fake content. A lot of digital innovation has led to a lot of nonsense. The internet is full of all these fancy words that you see on the right. We have not done enough to make sure that content is true content, real content, quality content, and that it makes sense. And last but not least, rights and privacy, the social part of another social part of sustainability. There is a lot of work to be done to respect more of people's privacy, to use data ethically, and to protect a lot of vulnerable people on the internet, as, for example, children or people who simply are not so used to the internet. All this adds up to these 6 factors of negative impact of digital, in which we as business analysts can make a change, can choose to do differently. And so to wrap this up, I believe that to design solutions that are sustainable, we have to think of solution that uses little energy as possible on every side, back-end, network, front-end. We have to design things that are meant to last. And we have to take into account that everybody, or at least as many people as possible, need to be able to use it, especially when we work on solutions for employees. Because the increased and ever faster digitalization of people's jobs means that we need to get these people onto these tools. And of course, if what we work on or what our company works on has a sustainable goal to start with, then that is already a very, very, very big step forward. And so, as I always say, there are no passengers on this spaceship, there are only crew. So I will like to invite all of you to think what your role can be in this transition to a sustainable economy. Thank you for listening. I see that there are things going on in the chat. I cannot do 2 things at the same time. And so if there are any questions, if there are any remarks, feedback, things that you've come to think of, please let us know.
Yeah, and about using resources. Remember that in I think it was in Norway, they get their electricity only from hydro kind of stuff, very sustainable. and they were not able, with the Ukraine war, to produce one factory to produce ammunition for the Ukraine war, for the Ukrainian. And because the TikTok factory, which was in the same area, was consuming too much electricity. So it's even a problem that we have before artificial intelligence. And just had an introduction this afternoon about ChatGPT and so on, about the resources and how it works. So if TikTok is a problem, if we are all going to play with artificial intelligence, I think we could shut down the whole Norway if necessary. So even if you do use and play on Facebook, TikTok, artificial intelligence, maybe you should maybe say like, okay, not today, or maybe only half an hour or so. Even that, if you're using resources, try to realize that many of those things are very resource hungry.
Yes, I see that Emily wrote about what search on Google creates. I think what the biggest change that we can make when we design solutions is to think of, is this needed? And is the balance between what this will use in energy, etc., does it balance with the usefulness of a certain feature or of a certain solution? If we start to pass by this checklist of the 6 impacts for every feature or every solution that we can that we start working on, we'll start thinking differently about when something is needed, instead of always thinking, let's do it because we can.
Ines, there was a good remark of Anne. If we have 46% exclusion, which is not exclusion 100%, having difficulties, are things not going too fast then?
I think things have always gone too fast. It's at least what my grandmother used to say, and she was born in 1903, and she remembered getting used to electricity in the house. I don't think it's only a matter of going too fast. I think it's also a matter of creating things that were meant to be used by many people. And it means, as a business analyst, that you have to go out and meet your users and meet the diversity of users that you're catering for. I often think of it when I look at the platforms that schools use these days for the parents. I mean, how more diverse can you get than an audience of parents? I think the analysts who have built this, and the designers who designed this, they would be very surprised if they would go into people's living rooms and see what happens there and how people interact with these tools. I think there's a big responsibility on us to design things that are simply more up to the job of catering for very many different sort of users. We put the bar too high for them, not the other way around.
Yes, I just want a quick reaction on that, because I have my parents who are 82 years old, and I see a lot of frustration of them. And me as a business analyst, I try to explain, but it's so hard, because somewhere in the track of technology, they lost it. Now they try to catch it up, but it's going too fast for them. And even if you try to explain and rehearse again and again, some things are so difficult. So it's really hard.
Yes, but the terrible thing is that some things are also difficult for us who work in digital every single day. I remember we had these COVID apps, and you had to prove that you were vaccinated, and then you had to prove that your children were vaccinated, and you had to add your children to the account. And believe me, it took me hours to find out how that worked. And I thought, if this is so difficult for me, then how terrible is it going to be? So it's really not only a matter of people not finding their ways or understanding it, it's really also a matter of let's not always design stuff for ourselves or people who are a bit like us, but let's go out and see who really, really needs to use these things.
And also not to try digitalize everything. For example, if you turn in plastic bottles in Netherlands, Germany, and so on, you have to pay a little fee for the bottle, and you get the money in return, statiegeld. So in our surrounding countries, deposit, yeah. So they do it like you return it in the supermarket, yeah, and you get some money back. Whereas Belgium, Flanders, is going to develop a very complicated digital thing, knowing that 46% of the Belgians have difficulties with digital. It's like, okay, why to make it complicated and digital and not use the solution which is used in even the French-speaking part of Belgium? It's like they want to digitalize everything. So that might not always be the good situation, certainly if we know that 46% of the people having difficulties or not even having access. My aunt is traveling half an hour back and forward because she doesn't have digital access, no smartphone, only to get her wire transfer things in the bank. Half back, half an hour going and back. So I think that's very sad. We shouldn't always do digitalize everything or having an escape route for those who can't. That's also, as business, you have to take some responsibility. Like, okay, not everyone is digital, so what can we do for those? Good. Are we okay to go to the second speaker? Just a question. Or still some people having questions for Ines? Okay. If so, we can start with the next speaker. Morten.
Yeah, we need to swap screen here. No?
I think Indra has to give you presentation, so
We will be here in a second. But I think while Indra is fixing my screen, then I will just talk and say essentially what Ines was preparing was actually very interesting, because I like your final statement about we all crew. Talking architecture is a little bit the same. If we're not able to get to that culture where we all feel for what we're trying to achieve, then it's not going to work. So thank you for reusing my screen and fixing it. So moving into business architecture as a driver for sustainability, I think I'll be talking a little bit to continue the journey where Ines started, because Ines has really, what I say, a giant picture of what is really the challenge. Why do we care? How do we want to live here for the next and the next generation? But if we go into the business architecture, I have a more modest view, which is more around the big picture. And the big picture is maybe what can we do within the next 1, 2, 3 years, but hitting in the right direction of what drives sustainability. Now let's start with some questions. Maybe you can use the chat or the arms up. So do you integrate your ESG initiatives in your existing portfolio management? With existing portfolio management, I mean where your corporate decisions are being made about where do we want to invest. Is ESG included and embedded in your PMO? Any hands up? Any comments? I can reflect to what I see. They typically are not. Even though we talk about it, then it's a kind of strategic projects somehow being approved, agreed from CXO level, a kind of separate from the processes running in most companies that we where we operate. But I see some comments here. There is a part of portfolio at the Belgium government. That's good. I think also that's where we want to be. So it's not two separate towers of prioritizing, but it moves into become the strategic alignment of where do we invest. Yeah, the cathedral thinking, I like that, Ines, if we mean the same thing. I guess it's a little bit a story here. I think it connects to sustainability. Otherwise, you'll need to help me if that's the trick. Because the way I know it is about if you were walking and saw someone cutting stones, and you ask him, "What do you do?" "I cut stones." But then you ask to the next one sitting next to him, doing exactly the same job, "What do you do?" "I build a cathedral." And I think that says a lot about what we do. If we are all in it for building the cathedral, or we're just going to work to cut stones, you can somehow motivate people more if they buy into the bigger concept, to the giant why do we want to go this way, because we think
I
of
can
yeah,
add to
please do,
that.
please.
The cathedral thinking is also feeling part that, as you said, I'm building a cathedral, knowing that you will not be there anymore when the cathedral is there. So you're building
Yes.
something very much for the long term, and because it matters, not because it matters that you will be there when it's finished.
And the thing I like about the cathedral thinking is the fact that, exactly like you say, it lasts generations. We can, for generations, use it, where some of the things we see driven by commercial models is more of a challenge. Like you briefly mentioned electric cars. Most studies we see nowadays actually indicate that electric cars are not so good for the environment for various reasons. One is lack of ability to reuse the batteries. It uses a lot of metals, rare metals from Africa. The amount of CO2 in the footprint of a new Tesla car is somewhat around, compare it with, it needs to drive 400,000 kilometers before it balances classical cars. And most cars don't go that long. So yeah, I like the cathedral thinking, but we also need to be aware that it's not just about financial business models. We need to change the mindset. Sustainability is about changing the mindset at how we go around it. With business architecture, I think we have something of a toolbox that can help this journey. And we should see business architecture as a toolbox. It's not an end in itself, it's a mean. It's a mean to drive sustainability, like it's a mean to drive strategic reality or strategic realizations of the things we want to establish. So I actually ended up answering the question myself. Sorry for that. I think also there is another thing, because I like your quote about going to your grandma who says things are going too fast. I have a mother-in-law. She's 30 years younger than your grandma, but she talks about, people talk about the good old days. Being honest, Morten, there are no good old days. They're just old days. So people like to have this development that takes place. And that's part of the challenge, because we all want to have better lives. We all want to take benefit from development. We all want it. It might be a challenge that it's happening with such a pace, but reality is we like development. We like to get the new gadgets. We like to get the electric car or whatever it is. But it has a challenge because there is just one globe. There is just one planet. So that's where we need to align with this. And the thing here is we need to act now if we talk into the why statement that Ines provided. But we also need to look into the realities that most of these things will happen on smaller timescales. And the fact that we can see here that the drawing from Einstein is that the way, if you drop a seed, it will take hundreds of years to build a tree, but we could chop it down in minutes. And the same thing happens with companies. It might take 10 years to build a company. We can chop it down in less than a year. And these are the mechanisms we need to consider as we want to refactor or transform some of the businesses. It might be we need to moderate our timescales. Sustainability, I think, has been covered, what it is and why. We see business architecture as a subset of the EA, as a discipline where you have the strategic alignment. This is where we can change the way we perceive value. This is how we make the organizational design, business design. And that helps us. It's a key ingredient of the EA framework, and we see it as a toolbox. Going into what is business architecture, we tend to say that it's one of the 4 disciplines of EA. EA, for some, sounds a little bit techy, but the front window of the cockpit, or the front window of the car, is really the business architecture. And we want to work with business architecture because it gives us a big picture. Are we all aligned on the way we want to prioritize? Are we all aligned about how we make our investments? So it's really strategic alignment between where we want to be in the market with our customers, with our offerings, and then how do we orchestrate this within the business operations. So we can say business architecture is more strategic and tactical than it's not operational. At its best, it's really strategic. Often it's tactical because we have customers every day. We need to make a bridge because we have customers today, and tomorrow or next year it might be slightly different, but it will take 3 years to finalize the bridge. So we need to be tactical. We also need to be strategic. Operations happens elsewhere. We tend to say that business architecture is high level, logical, and conceptual. And then very often we like to work with what we call the moving parts, or the dots, that it's actually about artifacts or dots that builds up an entire company. By having an overview of what are these dots, what are these artifacts, then we can try to share that with more people. And again, it's about the mindset, because if we don't share, people don't recognize what is architecture, what is business architecture. We need to provide this picture of a shared repository, shared portal, shared ways of working, which is what EA can provide to us. And then, of course, we need to reuse and benefit from those technical assets, which is part of EA, but not really of BA, where what do we do with them? We tend often to say that working with strategy, we need to convert the strategic goals, the strategic objectives into roadmaps, because that's the way we can provide the planning without going detailed in the particular projects. Now, trying to bring this into a kind of toolbox or approach of how do we drive with business architecture sustainability. We have here a simple model, or the 4 R's, we can say. And the first one, I think everyone who's engaged with requirements, business processes will recognize, because that's typically what we do every day. It's a plan, check, do, act kind of learning cycle, where whenever we see things which are not feasible, whenever we see things that could be done in a more digital way, whenever we see we could actually reduce some waste by improving the processes or put up some requirements, we will do it this way. There are a lot of people on the call today who recognize this is part of the job you do as business analysts. There's also another kind of which is reimagine. Reimagine is when you try to break the processes, because with rework, you want to improve the processes. With reimagine, you want to break them. They are opposites. And with reimagine within business architecture, we try to imagine another way of building up an operating model. A different operating model with different offerings to our customers within the market. And once we go through the reimagine, which is a kind of, I tend to use a picture of lying in the bathtub and you can imagine, oh, this could be different. You can also do that for rework. So it's a kind of same thing, whether you do giant steps or many smaller incrementals. But reimagine is really where you put forward a new way to deal with priorities of your business. And once you have that, it needs to be designed. That's what we call rethink. Because now you can actually move forward a process where once you have the new idea, you can actually start by what would be the new customer network, what would be the new partner network, what would be the new capabilities if we are to change capabilities. And once we have that established, we get to the point that we can see the regular reprioritization and prioritization of the stuff we invest in. These 4 R's I will go through in a step in the next 12 minutes. Over the hedge, 2 neighbors talking. What did they talk about? Was it the Philip Hendricks coffee from the BA shop, or was it something different? In this case, it was different. They wanted to have children. They wanted to have find a portal. Where can I get the equipment for? I'm going to have a child. I need some equipment. And one of the things they realized both was, why does it cost so many money to get just the basic stuff in place? But the portal I was clicking to here, Baby Sam, is a traditional shop. It's a traditional shop where you're manufacturing, you're selling new stuff all the time with discounts because there is new stock for next season. But these 2 ladies, they wanted something which was simpler, and they only have 1 child at a time. So could we reimagine another way of running such a portal? And of course, the answer is yes. So they actually started what is shown here, which is Børneloppen, which is in this case a Danish portal, but where you can almost immediately see, even though this is not written in French, Dutch, but you can see you're helping the world. You're saving water. This amounts to this amount of comparison to other measures. This saves the world for that amount of CO2 if we could start to reuse stuff. That's a reimagination. And then they started building a shop. And after a little while, they realized that they actually 5 years later have quite a decent revenue. And they actually realized that even in Belgium, in Liège, there is an interest. So there is a new spin-off. In Iceland, there is a new spin-off. So this actually takes off. It's another culture. It's another mindset. So why do I talk about this one? Well, when they hire people, they have realized they don't hire ordinary people that goes in for a salary. They hire people who actually like this idea, who have shiny eyes as they see, wow, this is a much better way of doing business. And it reuses a lot of stuff. You can say it's a second-hand shop at the end of the day. And the key elements to reimagine is that they need to go through what is the motivation model? What is our goals? As 2 females having this idea, what is their partner network? They need to partner up with a lot of people who no longer have younger kids. They're grown up. They need to have a second-hand shop. Could they put that into structure? Then what are then the offerings? What is then the new business model? So that's a reimagine. And by the time you have reimagined, you need to go through where do we have more, where do we have less? It could be a capability map in terms of where do we need to put more focus or more revenue. This is just an example. It could also be another capability map where we say things we used to do in a traditional stop, mark them red. We don't need them anymore. So we can use the capability map with overlays of colors to illustrate to management that these are the things we no longer need. We don't need manufacturing. We don't need a large storage room. We don't need inbound logistics in a traditional way because our new shop is built differently. We have some orange boxes we need to invest in instead of. So that's a way to use the business architecture to provide an overall picture of where do we need to take away functionality and add new business value. We can also do it with value streams, where we actually take different stakeholders' perspective and try to visualize what is really the sequence of flow. And below the sequence of flow, we can drill down to processes, which is also a design. How do we manage the processes? Because to have all this secondhand stuff being managed, we need processes. So that's a kind of the business design as a rethink. We are part of the reimagination. We are building the future processes of how we want this business to run. And then that brings us to the alignment, also to the strategic goals, and ideally to all of the ESG measures that we work with. And once we do that, and there are different measures to visualize that, I just put it on a roadmap to say any activity needs to go into the left-hand prioritization of what is really our strategic objectives. And the ESG measures needs to be there. It's part of the overall strategic agenda that we prioritize, not only for happier employees, happier partners and growth, but also directly to the ESG measures. Roadmaps is a great thing to see how the initiatives are laid out in time. There are other things we can use to make sure that things we want to prioritize are there. The final thing, the rework thing, is really where we also work with the daily improvements in terms of requirements. We could do this, that could improve the process. Can we add a requirement? Can we allocate a project that can take that requirement? It's more of the ongoing process that happens all the time. So you can say typically the alignment exercises happen at the portfolio office every month, every quarter, every year, whereas the rework are things we meet as they appear in the shops wherever we are. But all of these things can easily fit into a simple framework model of how things flow, because as we work with Reimagine, it's a kind of key artifact from business architecture we use. What is really our offerings? What is really our value partner model? What is really our business model? And once that is established, we move into the rethink or design phase, where we actually analyze our capabilities. What are they? What should be empowered or should be reduced? What is our value streams? And then as we go through the value streams, we can get to the stages of the value streams and even the processes. The process might take longer, but again, start from a business architecture perspective with a big picture. We need to understand the value streams are around our key stakeholders. The strategic alignment, the portfolio office, how we actually can use the architecture to target where we want to be, and that the portfolio office run the projects so they're getting delivered, compared with and aligned with the rework that happens all the time. In a nutshell, if I should wrap this up, you can say we start by leading with imagination and we finalize with analysis. And the thing that we can provide, which is a kind of unique for Indra and me and what we do in our company, is that of course we have SaaS offerings, tooling available that can support this journey. So if you are looking for a portal where can we do this in a portal rather than PowerPoint, yeah, then reach out to us, because that's exactly what we do as a business. So I think actually this was a kind of trying to take the story from Ines' grandma to my mother-in-law, who don't want to go back to old days, but really want to keep the pace and have all the development that DC can get, but we need to do that in a more sustainable way, which is aligned with the ESG objectives. So we're not saying you cannot have the good future, but we need to build it in a more reusable way. And I think that is a kind of a segue here for Stefan, because how do we do that in daily life, Stefan? Can you help me? Unless we have questions. Maybe questions first.
First, a few questions, and I wanted to go to the question. Do you have other examples of the two ladies with the second-hand shop for baby clothes? Because you spoke to us about this energy company.
Yeah.
Is that
we had the capability was inspired from that, but I didn't dare to share the data. But you can say it's true. We have the biggest energy corporation in Denmark. They used to have a different name 10 years back, but they went on an ESG journey. They wanted to be a green company. Their former name was Danish Oil and Natural Gas, and as abbreviation DONIG. And they realized over that transformation that took almost 7-8 years that the oil was a kind of not the future. So they sold off the oil to the French. The natural gas was a little later, not really that green. So they sold that off as well. Same buyer. We can then discuss whether that makes the world greener, but it makes the company greener. Then they sold off the transmission of stuff to another company, and realized actually that the only thing they had left was how to create wind energy. And they realized they were actually ahead of most of the other vendors in the world building wind energy installations. So today, that's 100% what they do. They have acquired stuff for creating wind energy parks, and they're actually doing installations and wind energy parks. They're not producing the windmills. We have other companies doing that, but they changed their business model entirely. So from that perspective, they changed a lot of capabilities. We used the architecture repository for that transformation, because step by step, as they were asked to divest stuff, they looked at us. What are we going to sell off in terms of IT? And then click, 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 here's the report. This is what you need to copy over, migrate over to the new buyer. So architecture is definitely useful in those combinations. Mergers and acquisitions is a big use case for architecture. There's a comment here about card catalog drawers. Okay, maybe that's from another chat.
There's a lot going on in the chat, so any other questions, because the chat is going too fast? Any other questions, remarks to Morten? You can unmute yourself and ask. Go ahead.
Otherwise, I think
yes,
it's
there's
time for
one,
you.
Morten. In your picture with the rework, I missed the part of looking at the processes. Sometimes it's not necessary to adjust anything in the software, just adjust software of processes, which is much more sustainable.
Yes.
It also, if 46% of the people can't keep up with software changes, they will stay aligned with what is possible because you don't change that. So
yeah, no worries. I agree. And processes is something you need to optimize. You can always look for efficiencies by analyzing the processes. The comment I tried to make was that if you want to optimize your processes, you're not moving to a new mindset. Then you're just improving on the way we're already doing. Whereas if you are reimagining, you can actually transform the entire mental model of how we do business, because you're actually identifying a new set of offerings, or maybe it's the same set of offerings. These ladies are actually selling the same stuff as a traditional shop, but they're selling it secondhand. So it's another distribution chain. It's another set of partner networks that need to establish. So it's another set of processes. I'm not really talking IT architecture here. I'm talking business architecture.
Okay. Yep. Clear.
Thank you.
Other questions, remarks?
Emily in Canada. Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm echoing another question that was in the chat about how do you get the different stakeholders to align and in the same direction in that mindset? Because as BAs, we work with all these different stakeholders who can't all agree with each other. And there are so many areas of ESG that we can tackle. How do you get everyone to say, we're going to do this set of priorities first?
Yeah, for me, it aligns to the portfolio office. We need to work aligned in an organization. So that means a common set of agreement of who has the responsibility, who has the accountability for driving these decisions. And that typically, I mean, it's something we can discuss, but for most companies, it appears to be in a portfolio office where you decide where we're going to invest with a board around these investments. And then you need to have a process of how do we get new items into this portfolio office. And that's typically driven by the architecture community because they somehow are on the scout for new requirements. And we need to have a kind of gate model. Simple things with a simpler gate model, more advanced things, more heavy things with a different requirements spec. But typically, that's a process you need to design within the organization. So you can say it needs to be frictionless to get new ideas. But you would need to have an architect's eye on why is this a good idea? What's the value setting? You need to understand where would it impact the businesses, services, where would it impact the applications or the IT landscape in general. That might be an architect helping with that. Then you need, if it still exists as a good idea, to have someone with a financial eye to look at it. What would it cost? Can we get an estimation? Maybe it involves architecture again, but again, some of the things we need to focus on is not to make decisions based on budgets. We need to make investments based on the value, the more value for the buck. That's what we are really trying to get to. And then value, because we're changing the way we see value with sustainability. We need to have value part much more in focus. So things that add to the long-term benefit is having a higher value, and then is having a higher ratio of getting through this approval process. If you don't have these processes, then we end up in this battle you'll see in immature organizations, where those who have the biggest problems get the biggest money, and that is firefighting. That is not maturity. So the idea here is really around how can we compare different investments up against a common set of goals. So we very often within architecture talk about goals and outcomes, where goals is a kind of thing where we can relate all of the investments. It's part of the pre-analysis phases. And if you don't score it up against the goals, if you don't score it and do all of the surrounding or impact analysis, then the investment should not be approved. But that's governance. So big corporations work with a strong governance around the architecture review, work with a good structure around how to get items into the investment portfolio. Typically, we talk about 3 inputs to the investment portfolio. If we take the EA handbook, where you can say there are these things that comes for the executive board. They're just to obey the order and go do. But then you have the strategic alignment, which is coming from the business architecture, which is by talking to the different stakeholders, you get these input. And then you have from the IT part, the system and technology input, because we are having old technologies, too many versions, lack of reuse of components, which is also input to the investment funnel. But in all these 3 types of input for the investment funnel, we need to have a structure on, a process for within a portal. Cool.
So,
Anne's comment I like, but it's probably a social talk later on.
okay, I think.
If you steal the screen, Stefan, then you can move on.
Yes, I have normally got access. Now, so this is the 3rd part of our evening, and this is the part of sustainability requirements, which was in fact, the sustainability requirements were introduced by IIBA in the business analysis standard last year in November. And in fact, that was the trigger to this series of presentation. So that creation of the new requirements category brought me to Ines, which I didn't know very well upfront, and we made together the Coffee Corner presentation at BA and Beyond. So many people could not attend in person and said like, oh, what did you tell about, and so on and so on. So we didn't have any recording. So we decided and asked together with the Brussels chapter, like, maybe we should do something online, and said like, maybe we should talk to Morten. And so we are here, the 3 of us, having 3 different angles on sustainability. And the last one is on the requirements category introduced last year in November. So let's see if it works. And yeah, question. Who knows already something about sustainability requirements? So if someone has something to say, I'm not going to give 1 minute to type it in. No. So someone that wants to share something about sustainability requirements, raise your hand and speak out loud, or be quiet forever. No? Okay. It doesn't seem no one, okay. No one very familiar with sustainability requirements, then, well, you're on the right spot, because I'm going to explain that to you. First, okay, so it's yeah. Well, we all know the BABOK, which is already there since 2006 in version 1.6. And the last version, which already more than 8 years ago, was April 2015. But already in the version 1.6, the BABOK introduced 4 different categories of requirements. And in 2006 and 2020, in 16 years, nothing moved. Until last year, November, a 5th category was introduced, which were the sustainability requirements. IIBA thought they were so important, or sustainability, the topic or the concept, so important to create a sustainability requirement category. But that didn't happen in the BABOK. That happens in the Business Analyst Standard, November 2022. So, requirements, definition of requirements. It's both in the BABOK as in the Business Analyst Standard. Oh yeah, I have to change to a laser pointer. So here in the upper right corner, you see where it comes from, or where it is presented. So in the BABOK and the Business Analyst Standard, there is a definition of requirements, which is, and I still have some problem in help. It's not going very well. So we did try. Yeah. This is a usable representation of a need. Next. Requirements focus on understanding what kind of value could be delivered when fulfilled. It's a usable representation of a need. So a need described in something which is more tangible, more usable. And it's also, it focuses on understanding what kind of value could be delivered when fulfilled. Could be, because we as business analysts, we don't create value. We enable or facilitate business to create value. If we create a solution and the business doesn't use it, no value is created with that solution. It's co-creation or facilitation. Next. So the first category that we have are the business requirements. It's like, next. So why are we doing something? Why are we going to change something? So I'm mentioning the 4 old categories because we have to see the holistic part of it. Where does the sustainability requirements fit in? So that's why I'm going through the older categories. So why are we doing that? That's the why. And this are in fact the translation, the more tangible description of a company's strategy, goals, objective. And you only have 2 or 3 of them. We don't have that much strategic goals and objectives. It's very limited. Next. So in this version, which is an existing version, example, sorry, a food retailer wants to create new business in an area of people that have food constraints, like allergies, intolerance, or religious, kosher, halal, or personal conviction, vegetarian, vegan. And so they want to create new business. So why are we going to do a new program? Because we want to create new business in a certain target audience. Those are business requirements. Next. You also have stakeholder requirements. Stakeholder requirements are the translation of those business requirements towards the participating stakeholders. Next. And it's in fact what? That's the key word. What do stakeholders need? Next. In the same context, so a consumer with food allergies wants to find recipes, taking those food allergies into account, instead of, so that he can enjoy preparation of a meal, instead of focusing on on the restrictions. I've got some intolerances. And each time when I want to prepare a meal, I have to look in the contents and it's like, is there that or that in there? And I only have intolerances, but people with peanut allergy, they can die if they have something with peanut particles in there. So what? On the contrary, with business requirements, they cannot contradict, they should not contradict, because that means that the company doesn't have a clear strategy or goals and objectives. Stakeholder requirements, they can conflict and they will conflict. But there's always the business requirements we have to look at. And it's a BA responsibility to find compromises and align the stakeholders with conflicting stakeholder requirements to find a common understanding. And that's a big responsibility of business analysts. Next. Then we have solution requirements. Solution requirements are the type of category requirements that most of us understand very well. And a lot of people think those are the only requirements categories that exist, and that, which is very sad. And sorry to hear, but it's also many BAs only think in solution requirements. So where is the keyword? Next. How? So previously we're thinking, what do stakeholders need? So how are we going to assure that those needs are met? So that's on the level of the solution. So we have functional requirements, non-functional requirements. User stories are a different way to define or describe solution requirements. And if we go next to the next one, so the same example, and that is a real world example. They created a website where the consumer can create an account to predefine a food profile, like allergic, intolerant, allergic, that intolerant. Well, once in a while, I can do some dairy products. It's not a big disaster, but not too often. Find recipes, and of course, map the recipes with our products. Don't remember the business requirements. We want to create new business targeting those type of people. Make a shopping list that is sent to the internet. No, one second, go back. One more back. No, back. Indre. Oh, okay. So make a shopping list to shop on the internet, or to go on smartphone, go into the store, you say, I'm going to that smart. Here is the milk for your shopping. Here is the sugar. So that was a real world example. And then a non-functional website should be secure and responsive. Next. The fourth category were the transition requirements who are only there in temporary modus, like they only have a temporary lifespan. And for examples is data conversion. So transition requirements can be on business level, business analysis, functional or system analysis level, on technical level. Training, and that's interesting. A training can be a transition requirement. For example, you go from Salesforce to Microsoft Dynamics. The training says like, oh, scenario A in Salesforce, we did this way, but now in Dynamics, you have to do it that way. That kind of training is only there for a limited amount of time, a limited period in time. And it helps people to transition from A to B, from Salesforce to Microsoft Dynamics. But for new people that arrive in the company where Dynamics is already introduced, they don't need to know how it was in Salesforce. So the training for those people is like scenario A, we do it in Dynamics, That is a training which is a solution requirement and not a transition requirement. So even training can be a different category of requirements depending on the context. Next. The keyword, of course, is change. Next. Marketing campaign. So in the upper right corner, you see that those things are described as well in the BABOK as in the business analysis standard. Next. Whereas sustainability requirements, it's only defined in the business analysis standard because it was introduced in November last year, and the BABOK dates from already more than 8 years ago, so it couldn't be there, or there was a back to the future thing going on. So sustainability requirements is a translation of a company's strategy on sustainability strategy, in something more tangible, something that is well described. Next. And here I have two keywords, inclusion and well-being. Well-being, not only of people, but also the planet, the animals on the planet. Inclusion, so in the donut economy example that Ines gave us, so everyone, leave no one behind. So the no digital people that are not very well aware of digital stuff, make sure that there's a fallback way for them to service, you know, but also inclusion of the animals, the planet. So, well, yeah, it's everyone. Don't leave anyone or any animal or the planet behind. We have to, well, it's like Robinson Crusoe. We are one small tiny place in the galaxy, and we have to take into account that we're not alone here. Next. So a strategy. So an example within the same area. As a leading food retailer wanting to contribute to a sustainable future, we want to minimize as much as possible the ecological footprint, as well the organization and the products, and also make sure that the products are created and distributed in social and ethical conditions. And the example that I gave before, when I made the first time these slides, a few weeks later or 2 months later, I saw they are exactly doing this. So that was fun. I haven't worked for the company for many years, and they were thinking in the same way. And that will come in an example next, on one of the next slides. So next. So this is the sustainability requirements, but how does that relate to the other categories? Next. For example, no, you're going too fast, you're going too fast. So a business requirement that is derived from that sustainability requirement could be the leading food retailer wanting to contribute to a sustainable future and to inspire the customers to purchase more sustainable products. So the food retailer is very famous to have the lowest price guarantee. But they also have this more sustainability. They have always been very mindful as an organization, and a few people here in the meeting know of which company I'm talking about. And so they also now are very active in sustainability, and not only greenwashing a little bit, but not always. So, okay, next. Which translates to the stakeholder requirements. Conscious consumer wanting to contribute to a sustainable future. I want to purchase products that have minimal ecological footprint and produced and distributed in good social and ethical conditions for the people involved. So knowing that this company always has the lowest price guarantee, maybe I would like to pay a little bit more, knowing that the products that I purchase are created and distributed in a sustainable way. Next. And then the solution requirements, and they are working actually on that. A sustainability score, which has the environmental, but also ecological and social and ethical aspect of the products. And so you have your recipe. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, I can't hear you. I can't hear you very well. Oh, maybe someone has by accident the microphone on. Anton, did you want to ask a question? Or was it by accident that you had your microphone on? Okay, Accident.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that was an accident. Sorry.
No problem. No problem. So and so if I have my recipe and I still have some products to purchase, I want to know what are the most sustainable products in the list. So the most sustainable sugar or milk or whatever. So next. And of course, the other types of requirements are indirectly also derived of the original sustainability requirements. So here you can see that I'll get to you, and so that the sustainability requirements create a kind of constraint, sustainability constraints on your change initiative. And you had a question?
I like the way you go from sustainability to business requirement to stakeholder requirement, but I was wondering if you're not missing then also the requirement for the stakeholders, so also willing to pay a higher price for it, because okay, he wants to purchase products with minimum ecological footprint and ethical conditions, but it's not always then that easy or that yeah, on a lower price. So I was thinking if then you also have to consider adding something in your requirements, but I'm also willing to pay a higher price for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It's only examples that we give here, but hey, I invite you to think about it and come back to us for next time. But if you find some examples, let me know.
Okay.
Okay. No. It might be a good remark. Yeah. Next. So, as I said, there are only a limited number of business requirements. Like, for example, I would like to reduce the churn, or I would like to increase the margin, profit margin with so many percent. Those are business requirements. The things that we described like goals and objectives back in the past. In fact, the business requirements are a way to represent strategic goals and objectives related to, for example, a change initiatives. Next. So as we have seen that stakeholder requirements are related to business requirements, each stakeholder requirement is linked at least at one business requirement. Next. Remember, when there were conflicting stakeholder requirements, you always had those business requirements. Those were carved in stone. And so conflicting, find a solution, but we always have the business requirements that we have to take into account. And solution requirements, you can derive them from the stakeholder requirements. Next. Transition requirements, you can have transition requirements at the level of stakeholder level, at solution level, and even technical level. That's also possible. Next. Whereas sustainability requirements, as we have seen in the example, they can be linked to business requirements, to all the categories except for the transition requirements. Yeah. That's a drawing which was very popular, Indre, at my presentation at the Coffee Corner session. Quite a lot of people enjoyed this one. Okay. Any questions on this model? Because we're close to the end.
Yes, Stefan. Unfortunately, I'm now in the car, so I can't see the presentation. But if I understood correct, you say transition requirements are not linked to the sustainable requirements?
Indirectly with the solution requirements that are linked, but not directly.
Okay, I can imagine that you also make sure that in the transition, you're sure you're taking sustainable.
Yeah. Point made. There are relations possible. Point made.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I will adjust my drawing for the next presentation. Thanks for sharing that. Good one.
And another question, perhaps I missed it. Sustainable requirements means that there are a new set of stakeholders for the business analyst. Is there already a defined group which is common amongst most companies as stakeholders for this type of requirement?
Not that I'm aware of, but it's not always necessary. That sometimes you are in a context of a project, you have your stakeholders, and suddenly the company says like, hey, we have here a few sustainability requirements, and you have to do it with the same stakeholders. So it's not necessarily, it could, but it's not necessarily include new new stakeholders.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just if I can make a comment on that specific question, I find that stakeholders for sustainability is normally external stakeholders or stakeholder groups. They're very rare, except for senior management in an organization where you have them internal in the organization. But that's not always the case, but I find it most of the times that that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, yeah, no, it's true, because we are holistic. It's holistic. We are not alone on this world, which, as mentioned a bit earlier in the presentation, is yes, we have to take into account. So in your strategy, the sustainability strategy of your organization, they will take into account, and sometimes you will have to include other external stakeholders, but not always. But it is very well possible. Okay. I could show the last two slides. It's a quick one, and then we can continue with questions. Normally we at the end, but it's not a problem to take a few minutes longer. Next, and then I'll go back to the questions that are in the chat. Next, yeah. So this is a scheme from the BABOK. Next. So first, if you are in a change initiative, why are we doing this? What do stakeholders need? How are you going to make sure that the stakeholders' needs are met, and then the change? So that's the cycle. But at the end of the transition, you might see that not everything is going as you predicted, and then you have new business requirements. So that's a circle, a virtuous circle. Next. And you don't see on the upper right corner a logo. Next. And the idea is to embed it in sustainability requirements. And that's the idea. And which compares a bit to the donut image. And that is my last slide. And now we can go to the questions, also in this slide. But I think, Indre, you might want to go to those at the end. There's some reference material and so on and so on. But you can go to the one previously. Yeah, that one. Leave it there, because I saw quite a lot of questions on that. For example, Elisaveta. Emily, okay, Emily left. How you can do that in Jira. So if you have the middle layer without the sustainable transition requirements, I've worked at a company who did some custom development on Jira that could, so you put your requirements in Jira the traditional way, but you say it's category business, and you can create the relationship within Jira, and we could visualize this. And even dependencies between the solution requirements, for example. So there was some development. I'm not a Jira specialist, but someone could show this on a screen. Just saying. Philip.
Yes, thank you for this overview. So I absolutely agree with and appreciate the intent to integrate sustainability requirements formally in a business analysis standard. But for me, the placement here is not making complete sense. Well, the placement in the previous picture where sustainability requirements were looking like they were driving the other requirements. I think sustainability requirements can be seen at the different levels. There can be sustainability-related business requirements. We want to reduce our carbon footprint by X% by a certain moment in time. You will have stakeholder requirements, translating those to more specific needs, and then solution requirements. How are you going to achieve that? And I can probably imagine also transition requirements. So for me, sustainability is something that I would naturally integrate within the other requirements types rather than putting it outside of it. Is there any... what is the reasoning behind this way of working?
Well, that's how the categories are built up in the BABOK anyway. So the drawing that you see without the green layer, the green parts, is really from the BABOK. It's not it's not in physically in the BABOK, but the definitions are that way. But here in this example, for example, and Wouter already gave an example, so you might in a transition requirement take into account some sustainability. So sustainability requirements are the translation of the sustainability strategy of an organization into something more tangible. For example, the business requirements of your project might not be that sustainability, but for example, on the solution requirements, you can use the digital sustainability techniques that Ines spoke about, whereas it's only at the solution level that they're going to do some sustainability, which is possible. So it's relationships, links, derive from left to right, it's derive, but the other links are not always derive dependencies. But it's linking. It's linking. Like, okay, we are linking this solution requirement number 8, for example. It's linked to the stakeholder requirement 6 and 5, but it complies to sustainable requirement 3.
Okay, so they're not adding in the current model that you've shown in the previous slide, which has the 4 requirement types: business, stakeholder, solution, and transition. They're not adding a 5th one in that model. It's more like a perspective that you can take, or that has impact on those 4.
Well, to be honest, the drawing that the BABOK uses is a number of rectangles, business requirements, the business standard, business requirements under their stakeholder requirements, under their solution requirements, only 1 rectangle, and on the side, a vertical rectangle, transition requirements and sustainability requirements. But those rectangles don't say anything about the relationships. That's the official drawing of the business analysis standard, which doesn't say much. And creating those relationships, it visualizes. So, and what was your remark again, Philip? Sorry.
Can you take the picture with the 4 circles?
Or
the one that resembles most what we find in the BABOK.
Okay, that's next. It's continue forward. Yeah, the classification scheme. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this one. So I interpreted the previous one as if here they will add one kind of at the same level as these 4.
No. And
okay, so if that's not the case, then my concern is
yeah,
if not needed, because that was my concern. It's something that, as your previous drawing shows, has an impact or is a perspective in all 4 of these, and I can imagine other perspectives as well.
Yeah. Well, you go to the next, Indre, because that doesn't work at the moment. So next. So and that's correct, Philip. Next, Indre. One more next.
Stefan, you can actually control the screen.
Okay, thank you. But it was not working just earlier. So sorry, that's not the item. Okay. Okay. So and I'm going to put the laser pointer. So this is from the BABOK. This circle. So it tells a bit the sequence of how you have to look at those requirement categories. They haven't made a similar drawing in the business analyst standard because it is not part of that regular order or sequence of using those categories. It's more like creating a constraint on all those categories, and like Wouter says, also on the transition requirements. It's adding constraints on, and they create a different category. It might be confusing. You're not the first one having that confusion, but it's how they. And the last time I spoke with Jazz on that, I says like, yeah, we still get that kind of feedback too. So you won't be the last.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Because as I said, I think it makes total sense. I think it's very good to add that perspective explicitly, but I think it's not the only one.
Okay.
I can, like, well-being is mentioned here as well, and I can imagine others.
The
It's
sustainability,
kind of a lens.
the sustainability requirements are well-being and inclusive. So the examples I gave were always having the two of them. Tom, sorry. Well, we are taking a bit.
Anyway,
Yeah.
my question is answered, or my concern is
Thank you.
Apparently I'm not the only one with the same question and concern.
You're not the only one.
Yeah.
And when I made the slides, I also had the question. So that's the reason I contacted Jazz, and
Yeah.
by me satisfactory.
Okay.
Okay. It's I see it more, the sustainability requirements, as sustainability constraints on for other categories. That's how I see it. It's not that way defined in the business understand, but that's how I see it. When I really take the definition from the business, that's how I see it. Remember, Ines, that the first time we had this discussion a year ago, that was like, how do we read this? Yeah, and we took a while, but we double checked it with Jazz.
Okay.
Any other question which is urgent and that needs to be asked this evening? So at the end, we have some reference material.
Oh, sorry, Stefan, I still wanted to add, you said I've checked it. Then the next check is with reality, right?
Exactly.
You will have to start applying it and see where it takes you.
Yeah. So we have shared quite a lot of information, three different perspectives. And whereas the last one is more tangible to business analysts, the requirements, but it's not only the requirements to use or the sustainability requirements, it's the mindset. Ines has already mentioned it, Morten has already mentioned, is a sustainability mindset. If you are going to do some AI playing around, know that it consumes a lot of energy. If you use it professionally with a good intention, go ahead. If you want to train yourself, go ahead. But if you want to play around, don't play too much around, like your TikTok videos. So, because there is not an abundance, we know it, there is not. So be sustainable in your head, having a sustainability mindset. It is even the most important thing that we want to give you out of this presentation. Okay. I think, yeah, questions. I think we have done quite a lot of questions, thoughts, and comments.
Yes, I wanted to add to that. So we've got a few links in our presentation. If there are other requests for references, material that you can read, where do I find this, where do I find that, please feel free to contact any of us speakers on LinkedIn or wherever by email. We'll be happy to help where we can.
Yeah. And if you would like to connect on LinkedIn, leave a little note that you saw this presentation and that you would like to connect so that we know where you know us from, and also to ask a question, for example. Okay. Well, like Rika says, thank you all. Have a good evening. Anyone else?
Well, just to pop in, we have still the Mentimeter, or so to have an idea of how you liked this session. Those are three speakers. Oh yes, sorry, we forgot something. Yeah, we can first go to this one. So if you go to menti.com, or you can scan or use the QR code, or in the chat, I will also add the immediate link. There you can go and have some questions about how you would rate today's session. So if you are all familiar with menti.com, it should go easy. So it seems I cannot share it, but we have a very good rate of 4.5, 4.7 on 5. So that's a very good. So I think that means that you really liked the session.
That's because we're still watching them.
So the topics were very interesting. We have a 4.8 score. So I think that's very well. It's also, people say the discussion was relevant to me. So 4.7 points on 5. So I would say thank you very much to the 3 speakers. You did it very well. We liked it very much.
Cool.
And we have also one final thought. One person say, insightful, really need to read the BABOK.
Well, go for the BA standard too, the business analyst standard, because in the we don't have sustainability requirements.
Yeah, and maybe to just finish, Indre, can you go back, I guess, 2 slides back? Yes, so maybe this is also important to share with you guys. So we have the weekly online BA Cafe. So that's each Friday during lunchtime in Belgium and the Netherlands. So you can just jump in and hear interesting topics about everything. Business analysis or something else is also fun over there. And then we are celebrating the 20 years of IIBA on the 1st of November coming up. So therefore you can also have all information and register on those on that link. And there is also a new next event. I think, Philip, it's in Colruyt. I'm not sure. Yes. So how to use company culture as a change enabler. You can see also the link on our IIBA website, or you can also see it passing by through LinkedIn. So please feel free to come over and enjoy the session as well.
One little remark, the timing of the BA Cafe is only 1 more week at CET, and the week afterwards it will be CEST. That's why I always use Brussels time. So
okay,
with that Brussels time.
Okay, Brussels time.
Yeah, but it's also on the slide. So next week, next Friday, it's the last one. This Friday, the last one. And then the week after, it's at CEST.
Yes.
Central European.
No, it's actually the other way around. This week it's still CEST, and from next week onwards, it's correct what the slide says. I now realize.
Confusion over here.
But it doesn't matter. If your clock says 12:30, it's time to go to the cafe.
Correct.
If you live in Belgium.
Yeah. So Brussels time. Go your time and day website and say Brussels time, and then you'll get the right time.
Okay. So I would say thank you, everyone, for being over here and for listening to us.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Indra. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Good evening.
Bye.
See you around, everyone.
Bye-bye.